All right, Stefan, we're going to talk about smart search today, AI powered searching. So, what does smart search actually mean? And to me, what I find very interesting is that many times on a web shop or in a product listing, you might want to search for a certain keyword, but you don't really find it as an attribute that you can filter on, either because the brand hasn't provided that. It might be for an occasion, or it might be a very specific feature of a product that you're looking for. And you just wish like you could just type it in, but there's no reference to it in the product description either. So the question is like, how can we extend and make the products much more searchable, so to say, not just by what is provided by the brand's PIM system, where they keep all of the attributes and product descriptions, but go further than that, and to make sure that it really understands what we're trying to find as an outfit or whatnot. So maybe you can just share some details about how we do smart search.
Of course. So let's start first. I mean, you already gave a quite detailed introduction to what we think about what smart search really means. But let's try out some things here. So let's start with something very obvious. So now we are going to search for, jeans. And again, this is our internal tool, but I type jeans and what I get is, jeans. Not too surprising. What now makes it smarter than what we're used to is, and you mentioned that already, traditionally search is mostly based on text. So, I mean, of course, each product has some name usually, and then we have some category attached to it, and then probably some description, and then usually search tries to find that word or parts of that word within all that text that we have. So, I mean, that works quite well for something like so straightforward as jeans. However, now let's try something a bit more special, maybe. Let's now go for striped shirt. Also here you could say, yeah, maybe actually you have tagged that in some sort of attribute of your product data. Of course, then that would also be a pretty straightforward lookup.
Mm-hmm.
However,
like
in this case,
category shirt and then pattern.
Yeah, exactly, something like this. Then you could still get that. But of course, that would already require you to apply all these tags on all the different products. And then also usually with text comes the problem. So if you now write that slightly different, then you might not actually get that hit. Also, just to explain what we actually see in the background, here we do not actually look into the text. So all what you see here is purely based on what the smart engine in the background basically sees within the images. So already to say that up front. But all right, so that worked as well. Now let's try something even more, let's say abstract in a way. So now let's, for example, say I have a job interview and I want to have an outfit. So now let's try job interview outfit and see what happens next. So now we get a lot of more formal, smart casual things. So usually blazers, shirts, etc. So what's interesting here is that we know that these words, they don't appear anywhere. I mean, they wouldn't even appear in any kind of description. And I mean, unless of course you add it, but usually that is not what is part of the description. Yet it kind of worked out. So someone made that connection between job interview and maybe you can't do much wrong with the blazer. So that's why it then shows these results. So let's try going to the beach outfit. So
this
also
is
here,
basically both of these search queries is basically occasion based, right? Like what are you going to do?
Exactly. So that's what's interesting here. Also here it's already a bit interesting. I mean, here it's more like a more phrase even, so some more words. But yeah, I think also that would probably work at the beach.
How about hiking? If I would like to go for a hike. And this might be the thing, right? Like, so some brands that are not necessarily known for outdoors. They might not even consider to tag their products based on outdoor activity and so on. And in providing this type of smarter search capabilities, you might actually capture some more customers that are kind of wondering if you have anything within this occasion.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, that looks like outdoor. Now let's try. So this was mostly about occasion, as you said. What's maybe also interesting is to think more about outfits. So we could, for example, say, or for some reason, I am interested in a black and white outfit. Let's see what shows up. And voila, you get black and white outfits. So also that worked. So here again, of course, it considers the whole picture. And that is maybe also worth considering that usually, these pictures, these model pictures especially, they are usually connected to one particular variant or product that you have. In this case, probably the hoodie. But of course, the picture shows more. And since we're not just looking at the product description, we're looking at the whole thing, we can actually recommend things even based on the whole look, so to say. And I'm in black and white, and that works pretty much with everything. And that is also now one important difference also to the pure text-based search, I would say, that it is super flexible. So now we search black and white. Now I'm trying red and blue. You can imagine I can possibly pick any kind of color combination.
And I guess here it can be extended further with red and blue striped outfits, for example, or floral, maybe. I'm not sure how much red and blue there are for florals, but maybe like yellow and
let's try. Of course, depends also now on the actual catalog behind. If there is actually something like this available, but yeah, it looks like there are some flowers, and it's red and blue. So yeah, it can even make that work. So generally, everything that is, I would say, that is visible in the picture, it can connect. So even if you would say, I'm interested in, let's say, a T-shirt with a big print of the logo or something like this. So you could say a big logo print.
How about if we would search for a feature that is not necessarily shown, like weather-resistant jacket?
Good point. Let's try.
Or rain-resistant, rather.
Rainproof.
Rainproof, yeah.
Jacket. So, all right. There we have some jackets. They also do look rainproof, first look, but that's actually a very important point here. So it made that connection, and I would say, it also looks plausible. However, now, especially if you're now presenting that to a customer, you have to keep in mind that if it's purely based on the visuals here, it might show you something that looks rainproof. But of course, as a customer, that is important that it actually is. And in this case, you probably want to back that up by also looking into the description. To not make that promise, it's rainproof, and it turns out it isn't. That is one important thing here to consider, that it makes the connection based on the looks, but it does not mean, especially about these kind of things, that they actually are, of course.
Got it. How about concepts like styles? So streetwear or 70s look?
Let's go for streetwear outfit. No, I think
looks like something I could wear on the street.
Yeah, of course, here important to mention is also here now we're a bit in the territory where it's a bit about different people might have different opinions a bit, like what now is exactly streetwear or not. Also, these kind of things also culturally tend to change a bit.
How about now you said both culture. I also see some skulls here. Can we first and foremost try to see if we can find like skull prints. And then culture-wise, it would be interesting to see if it can figure out like Japanese or Spanish and see what it connects to various cultures or maybe even religions and stuff.
Right. So here, I think we got a lot of skulls. So that works quite nicely. So, and then you said you want to search for country, nationality, sort of.
And I mean, just to linger on this part.
Yeah.
So it might be the case that you on your web shop or B2B shop, doesn't necessarily matter, wanna like emphasize a special type of capsule or category of products. So you could, for example, have a special listing that you say like skull theme or Halloween. Maybe you can search for Halloween.
Yeah.
And you obviously do not have the time to go around and tag every type of product that you potentially could use within your catalog for Halloween. But having this type of smart search kind of, you just have to do it once and then you get all of the options here available.
Exactly. I think that's a nice application on your website or in the store. I mean, basically, the only thing you need to do is to come up with some keyword or phrase that makes sense around Halloween, for example, this one, and then you dynamically get these kind of results. Yeah. Of course, I mean, here's actually something that probably also would work for Christmas. I mean, Christmas is maybe another one. If you don't have that label, you could just create one for Christmas, etc.
Exactly. I mean, you could be very much, even if it's not 100% accurate, which we hopefully will soon talk about, like how accurate is this actually. But you can still, with very limited resources, create very customized experiences and dynamic experiences on your shops. How about culture references? Like that does understand, let's say Spanish.
Spanish outfit. Now let's see what happens.
Yeah, Latino style. Even if maybe Spanish was not Latino, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, here of course it becomes difficult. I mean, I'm from Germany. I'm kind of scared what would actually happen if you try to search for the German outfit. But of course, the problem is, the problem is that of course very much depends on the training set that it has been trained on and what it was given as examples of. And yeah, I feared something like this. So I mean, that for Germany, you kind of get this kind of Lederhosen Bavarian style, which is of course very stereotypical. So that is a bit the thing where you need to be a bit careful that it might have connected to some stereotypes you might not want to be behind.
Talking about stereotypes, well, it's not us, right? It's the AI. You cannot do it. So what about references to artists or well-known people?
Right. For example, let's go for Steve Jobs. Because he had a very typical kind of outfit. So yeah, that also works. So you get the typical black crew neck style.
Maybe Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
See if it understands that it's about training.
Yeah, I mean, at least some
basketball. The logo.
Exactly. So that works as well.
I see 23. Can you literally just search for 23? I'm quite sure the products have not been tagged with 23.
Probably not.
Do you have to add the print, you think? Like how
much
can we challenge
print? Yeah, let's go for print first, and then I can do 23. So yeah, that did not actually made the print made it get worse. Let's see if I do this. No. So however, I am, and just to online utopia, let's try that one. Just I'm curious because sometimes it does work. If you use a phrase that is on the t-shirt, yeah, you see that worked. So I mean, maybe 23 because it's a number, it's too ambiguous in a way, but with text it can actually work.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we when we're applying this in our solutions, we're not just doing the smart search. We are combining it with also verifying the keywords towards the attributes and the descriptions and much more, just to make sure that we give the right score and priority. But I mean, how can this work? Like, who's telling it what Steve Jobs is, and then how is it then figuring out what the products that matches that are? I mean, what's the technology behind that powers this thing?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in the end, I mean, now everything we showed is very much just based on one particular model and about the visual aspects. Of course, if you deploy that for real, you would probably have a bit more, let's say, different sources that you ask, basically. And then you combine all the results, and we can discuss that maybe a bit after. But yeah, now the big magic behind is usually a model called Clip, which is originally OpenAI created that one. And what is special about this model is that it is essentially trained on pairs of images and text. And as you can see here, let's pick, I mean, this one here, for example, Television Studio. You see, I mean, here they give examples, and that is pretty much what we also did before. So you can give it any kind of text phrase, which will then be, and that's what we talked about the last time, will create an embedding, basically a list of numbers. And then you do the same for the image as well. So, and then you again get an embedding. So basically you get two embeddings, one for the image, one for the text. And then you try to find if you have the text, you try to find the image, which is the embedding the closest to the embedding of the text that you entered. The interesting thing, it works both ways. So you can also give it the image, and then it tries to find out of a given list of text, the text that is closest, but also vice versa. And the interesting part, most interesting part here is.
So you're saying like we could have given it the Steve Jobs outfit, and as an output, the AI model would actually said something about Steve Jobs.
You would give it generally, let's say, a list of candidates. So either you give it a lot of images that you have embedded. So it knows, let's say, 1,000 images that it can pick from. And then you give it one text. And then it tries to find the image that is closest to that text. That's one way. Or you do the opposite. So you give it 1,000 different texts and one image, and then it gives you basically the text that is the closest to the image. And that is basically what they do here. So here you have one image and 5 different phrases, and you see the one which it's the closest one. I mean, that's this one here. So it's Television Studio.
So it works basically different from how like a ChatGPT would reason, so to say. This is much more of a like a searching or a mapping exercise, and not so much about like generating text or generating the image.
Exactly. So I mean, in the end, LLMs and vision, there is some overlap, of course, but I think the important part here, what makes it also so much better to actually use, is that you generally need to you create these embeddings once, and then you put them into a database and just keep them there. And then whenever you do a search, the only thing you need to do practically is to take that text, create another embedding, and then just do a math operation and comparing it to all the embeddings that you already have. And this kind of operation can usually be done quite fast. And it's also very predictable, because for the same text and the same images, you will always get the same results. That is something that is not always guaranteed if you use an LLM. And that makes it so much,
But what's also what's also interesting is that it's been trained on like text phrases, maybe some keywords here and there, and image. But still, we don't have to have the exact text phrase. We can just use one of the phrases here, like lecture room. It says here a photo of a lecture room, but we can just say lecture, and it would still work even though it has not been trained on that particular word and that image together, right?
Exactly, because it also knows the connection between the words. So let's say it has seen once. Let's take this image of the park. So here's an image of a park, and it has seen this image, and then there's a tree. But at the same time, it also has seen other pictures of trees and has there the connection between the tree image and the tree as a text. And then there might be more images that are now connected to trees and so on. So the thing is that it, of course, then also creates in the end an understanding that a tree and the branch of a tree and a leaf, I mean, that they're all somewhat in the same corner. And that is why it can be a bit, or it can be used in a more kind of fuzzy way. And I mean, that's actually interesting. There is a tool that, just to visualize that a bit, you can actually somewhat visualize that as well. It's not super precise, but it's more to explain that a bit. So I mean, here you see actually an image, and you see over here, you can give it again like a text. And then in the image, it will sort of point out where now the models kind of sees that connection between that phrase and the image itself. And you see, as we would expect, so shoe, down here. So that's work. But what's even more interesting is, I think, now here's the same thing. And here we see job interview, which is more in a kind of abstract connection. And you can see here, interestingly, that it, I mean, sure, there's more all over the place, but sort of the main focus here is actually on the tie. So this is the area where it mostly sees, okay, that's what makes it a job interview outfit. That's quite interesting.
So basically, the part of the image around that tie is basically the key focus, and then it will try to find images from our catalog that are similar to that part of the image.
I mean,
probably not.
Practically, it looks still at the whole embedding. I mean, this is more to a way to visualize sort of inside how the model kind of comes in the end to that embedding. But still, I mean, that is probably when during the training, it has seen maybe thousands of images of people wearing sort of this kind of outfit, or especially an outfit with a tie. And then there was some text next to it, and some caption under the image, which talked about job interviews. And that's how that figured, okay, whenever there's a tie, then there is more connection to job interviews for some reason. Basically.
Got it. This also means that if you have as a brand, if you have a very special way of talking about your products in your collection, you have like certain keywords that are unique, it would require you to like fine tune or train further with your training pairs, right? Like here's an image and here's basically those keywords that makes sense. Could be like a special way of you referring to a gender or a certain part of your clothing, so to say, and then you would have to like fine tune it so that the clip model then would understand later on when your customers who probably are understanding or aware of your definitions would like to search for those, right?
Exactly. So generally the, let's say, out-of-the-box clip model has been trained on a very, very broad set of pictures. So I mean, as you can see here, I mean, it knows things about food. Question is how relevant that kind of knowledge is for fashion. Oh, maybe it is in your case, but of course, it then, if it's very broad, it also lacks very kind of deep detail into certain domains. Mm-hmm. So, which also means, let's see if you can maybe see here something. As you said, I mean, if you have a special, let's say, treatment for your fabrics that has then a name, or also maybe functional wear, especially, I mean, we talked about outdoor stuff. I mean, there you might have a lot of things or details on the items, which then have their, well, again, names. Of course, that is, the more detailed it is, the less likely it is that it was included in the original training set. So that is then something you would probably want to fine tune yourself, which means you basically give it more examples of things from your collection, and then with the text, and then it will be better at making these kind of connections.
All right. Is there anything else, Steffen, that we should be aware of in regards to the clip model?
I mean, mostly what be now said. I mean, in your case, depending on what kind of type of clothes it is, you might need to fine tune it a bit if you're looking for certain inputs. Then the other thing, I mean, the Steve Jobs example. Here, of course, also to consider is that the if it's about people and it's everything that is a bit about, let's say, trends in general, I mean, everything that changes over time. Of course, you have to consider that the model is sort of frozen in time. So it only knows the data set it has been trained with and up to that point. And then, of course, with people, I mean, nowadays, there are other celebrities that didn't even exist or were not popular at that time when that model was trained. So it will not know them. So in order to make them known, you would have to retrain it or at least fine tune it.
Exactly. That's actually a good point. So if you're, let's say, a brand within sports and you sponsor certain players, then you might want to train the name of that soccer player or tennis player, whatnot, with images, so to say, so that when on the website searches for that name, you might find not just particular product that matches that, you know, it's been tagged already, but also other things that are that could then be similar to what that person might wear, that football player or whatnot.
And then also, I mean, fashion styles. I mean, some are more timeless than others. But I mean, of course, you could argue, I mean, streetwear now and 5 years ago and 5 years into the future, is that the same? Probably not.
Yeah.
So after some time, you probably also need to do there some readjustments.
Correct. Also, maybe to wrap it up with, I could give an example where we have applied this technology, which I think is a very cool way. So endless aisle solutions in store is one of the solutions that we offer. And, you know, in stores, you don't always have these stylists, you know, the part-time workers, and not everyone on the shop floor is fully aware of your full catalog of 3,000 styles or and whatnot. So, you know, if you're a good salesperson, you might want to ask, like, okay, well, what are you going to wearing for? Where are you going? What are you going to do? And they might say, like, I'm going for a wedding or so on. At that point, there might be so many types of products that might be relevant, but you need to basically know how to find them. Like, what type of combinations of attributes should you choose, and because you might not be able to search for like that outfit, but embedding this type of technology where you just, you know, offer the keyword wedding, or they can just type it in wedding, and then they can do, say, like women. So you combine basically the attribute and the keyword. You really can help salespeople elevate their service level a lot in a very simple way. So
exactly. I mean, just to add on that, I mean, yes, I mean, as we said before, you likely want to combine it also with the different filters so that you can, for example, I mean, usually you're interested in things that are in your size. So that additionally, of course, you would probably want to consider these filters together with this. Or even if you have let's say that product has a special name, that you, of course, also consider the name of the product itself, so that in the end you combine all these different types of searches. And I think that's what actually really makes it then really smart, that it's visual, but also what's in the text, so that you actually know it's really rainproof. And then in the end, you basically combine all of these and you get one kind of ranking. And that is, I think, then really the smart result in the end.
Exactly. And that's actually not that easy to achieve. I mean, we've had to like really try to figure out like how to not mess up the ranking, because sometimes you really just want to have what you know chose in the attributes. Like you want a shirt that is white and so on, and then you happen to write a text, and it becomes very creative in its smart, so to say, in its search, and might score certain things very high up, and then technically it makes sense, but from a user point of view, it doesn't actually make sense. So you really have to be careful to not mess up also as well, right?
Yeah, not to be too smart, basically. Yeah, but yeah, it's a lot of fine tuning in the end to get that ranking right, for sure.
Cool. All right, I think it's a wrap. Thank you so much, Stefan.
Likewise.